It's on.
0 to 10 years. Decade 1. Action. Zero to 10 decades. Decade 1. Action.
Oh.
0 to 10 years. Decade 1. Action.
Today is August 25th, 2011. I'm Lamar Buckner. I was born April 27th, 1922 in Provo, Utah. When I was blessed with the name of Lamar Buckner, but the ward clerk entered on the certificate the name Elmer Lamar Buckner, and as a result, I've carried the name Elmer Lamar Buckner in military records, non-church records, all my life, although my name was really given as E. Lamar Buckner. I lived in Provo, Utah for 18 months with my parents. My father was Elmer Ray Buckner. My mother was Laverne Altus Maxfield. When I was 18 months old, my father was transferred by the J.C. Penney Company to go east to manage one of their stores. We moved to Herrin, Illinois at first, and were only there a few weeks when he was transferred again to Frankfort, Kentucky, where we lived for 2 or 3 years. My earliest memories of my lifetime go back to Frankfort, Kentucky. I remember being in the backyard of our home, and pictures were taken which were often shown to me, which made my memory sharp as to what I remembered at that time. But we lived there for about 2.5 to 3 years before moving back to Utah. During the first decade of my life, I found that we moved a great deal with my father's business. We moved from Salt Lake City to Ogden to Pocatello, Idaho, and back to Salt Lake and then again to Ogden. I was in grade school in the 4th grade, and I'd been in 10 different homes up to that time. My memories of those first 10 years are included with my baptism in the church. When I was 8 years of age, I was baptized in the Weber State College Gymnasium. At that time it was called Weber Junior College, and we went to their swimming pool for my baptism. During those first 10 years, we moved again to 28th Street from Adams Avenue and lived there for a number of years. The main events in my life during that first decade were the events of my baptism. I remember it well. I'm not sure why my father was not asked to baptize me, but he wasn't, and I always felt bad that he didn't get the opportunity to perform my baptism. The next 10 years of my life, from 1932 to 1942, included my years when I joined the Boy Scouts of America. When I turned 12 in April, I wanted to become a Boy Scout, but it wasn't until the following December that I was invited to join the Boy Scout Troop 17 in the 5th Ward in Ogden, Utah. And after I joined the troop, I became deeply involved in scouting during those years. We attended scout camps at Camp Kiesel on 2 different years during those early days. and we did much hiking in the surrounding mountains of Ogden City, going up to Mount Ogden, going up to Ben Lomond, Malin's Peak, Malin's Basin on several occasions. I enjoyed my scouting experience very much and enjoyed being a part of the scouting program. When I turned 15, I received my Eagle Scout badge in the month of April 1937, and continued to be associated with scouting for the rest of my life. I've now completed 75 years of enrollment in the scouting organization and have been privileged to serve in various capacities, including president of the Ogden Council, an area president of scouting, and on the executive board of the Boy Scouts of the Western region. I've enjoyed very much the exposure to scouting and have been grateful that my sons and grandsons have been deeply involved in scouting, and I think they've all enjoyed that experience because of the emphasis we gave to it when they were growing up. In the years of 1936, I began to sell magazines. The Saturday Evening Post, Ladies' Home Journal, and Country Gentleman. And I had magazine routes that covered a lot of Ogden City. In fact, it took 2 days for me to deliver my Saturday Evening Post on Tuesdays and Wednesday after school. And I had the largest magazine route in Ogden City and used that to earn money to buy my scout uniforms and other needs that I had. I came down with appendicitis when I was almost 16 years of age while being in a scout camp, and went back to home during the night and was operated on the next day. That ended my magazine sales position, and someone else took over the routes at that time. I think if it hadn't happened, I'd have probably still been selling magazines at this age. During the years of 1932 to 1942, my father was out of work and was ill with rheumatic fever, and he was out of work for several months. As a result, we were in the middle of the Big Depression, and we understood and knew what it was to be short of money and short of food, and we had to scrimp in order to meet our needs, but we did so. As I reached the age of 16, I got the opportunity to have a job at a grocery store, George Grant's Red and White Market, and I drove a delivery truck for him on Saturdays and made $1 a day delivering groceries for him. Later on, I was hired by June Stimson at Stimson Market to bag groceries and to help customers, and I made $1.50 a day at that job, which was considered to be pretty good pay for a young 16-year-old fellow at that time. During these years between 1932 and 42, I became active in school and started in debating in the 8th grade. I took my first debate class, and after that, every year, I would be involved in debating, and as such, became a member of the debate teams at Ogden High School. My companion and partner John Vernew and I took second place in a 3-state debate meet held at Weber College, where we came in second. We had to debate the winner 3 times. We beat them once, they beat us twice finally, and as such, we took second place. But we were acknowledged as the winning team from Ogden High School.
Dad, do you remember the topic of your competition debate?
I don't remember now the topic, but we used to debate the ownership of railroads, the unicameral legislative system, the acts of war, South America, treaty agreements. We had a lot of different subjects that we debated. In 1938, I entered the Ogden High School, and this was the first year for a freshman class. We were really juniors to go into the high school, who would stay and graduate 2 years later from the new Ogden High School. There were 2 classes that graduated before us, but they didn't have 2 years in the new school, and we did. While serving in the high school, I was called to be the editor of the yearbook for Ogden High School. It was called the Classicum, and we produced a yearbook that later was awarded an All-American from the United States as one of the best yearbooks in the nation. And that, as such, led to further experiences I had later on. I graduated from Ogden High School in 1940, and I had been given an ROTC commission with a captaincy in the ROTC, largely because I was editor of the yearbook. I think it wasn't because of my military skills or anything like that. After graduating from Ogden High School, I was awarded a scholarship to Weber Junior College in debating, and I entered the junior college in the fall of 1940 and spent 2 years at Weber on their debate squad. We traveled to North Carolina, California, Kansas, all over the West for Weber College debate, and felt very fortunate in some of the participation that we had in debating. I also would participate in impromptu speaking and extemporaneous speaking, and I won several awards in extemporaneous speaking as well as impromptu speaking. But I always felt that my public speaking experience was very helpful to me later on. It was while I was a senior in high school in 1940 that I became closely acquainted with my future wife and sweetheart, Melba Hale. She was a member of a group of girls that we called Glamour Incorporated, and those girls were very attractive. And I used to go with Melba's best girlfriend, and she went with my best boyfriend, and we just were good friends at that time and knew each other in our association there. Later on, when I graduated from Weber College in 1942, I invited Melba to go to our graduation dance at Weber College, and that was the same night as her senior prom for her graduation from high school. So we spent half the night at her dance and half the night at my dance, and that was really our first formal date that we had. We had been good friends up to that point, but had not really dated until about that time. In the fall of 1942, I entered Brigham Young University and as a junior, and there became involved with Viking social club, and also I was involved with their debating club and group, and did represent BYU in various tournaments throughout the West that we attended in the debate program. I also served as a cheerleader at BYU first year. It was the year that we played University of Utah in Salt Lake City, and the first year we beat them 6-0 in football, and I was a cheerleader at that game, and that was unbelievable that BYU would beat University of Utah, but it was a great experience. In my junior year at BYU, I was elected by the student body to be the junior prom chairman. This was a classical competition every year to elect the junior prom chairman. And historically, the junior prom chairman usually became the student body president the following year or the senior class president because of his recognition of the junior prom. We produced our junior prom that year, which was the first part of April 1942, and shortly after, within 2 weeks, reported for active duty with the Air Force. I had already signed up as an Air Force Reserve member and was called to active duty in April of 1942. And I went into the service as an aviation cadet, striving to work my way through to become an Air Force pilot, which I eventually did. In the years between 1942 and 1952, these began with the war years, and I spent 2.5 years in the Air Force flying a B-17 bomber over Germany, flying 23 missions, combat missions. Then we flew 2 food missions where we dropped food to the starving Dutch people in Amsterdam and Rotterdam on May 1st and May 3rd of 1945. After the war ended a few days, we were sent to pick up some French prisoners of war. We were sent to Auschwitz, Czechoslovakia, and we loaded 35 of them in our B-17 bomber and flew them back to France. They'd been in prison camps for several years, and we were the liberators to get them back to France. This proved to be a great experience. I was very fortunate during World War II. We had some close calls. On one occasion, I was forced to land in a pasture just outside of Metz, France, when we lost an engine and landed on a metal fighter strip that was not designed for bombers. But as a result of that, we got down safely, and I picked up a statue that reminded me of the prophet Joseph Smith that I have carried ever since as a reminder. It was given to me by the schoolmaster who had it posted on the wall in one of his school classes. And when he saw me admiring it, he asked if I would like it. I told him I'd be grateful for it. And I've carried that, have it at home. I've often showed it to people, and they always say, "Well, that's the prophet Joseph Smith." It really wasn't, but it reminds us of the prophet Joseph Smith. I also was fortunate enough to overcome a challenge when, on one mission, I lost my left wing man. Lieutenant Ballard was hit with cannon fire from ME-262 German jets, and he was on fire and went down. My right wing man, Lieutenant Audet, had his tail assembly shot off and he went down. And then the lead German pilot must have been hit by one of my gunners because he flew right into the ship underneath us and they both blew up. I'm sure he was after us and would have tried to take us out, but he was killed or wounded or damaged before he had a chance to remove us. And Elder Schultz was the ship that blew up underneath. So we lost 3 ships that day, each with 9 men. 27 men lost their lives on that mission. There was another mission that we flew when I caught on fire. We were hit, and I was on fire with my number 1 engine over the coast of France. And when we circled after we got the fire out, or thought we had it out, we decided we'd fly back to England because we didn't know whether we'd get shot down again if we tried to land. We got back to the base and saw on the bulletin board my name, Buckner Crew, MIA, missing in action. This was the second time I was listed as missing in action. The first time is when we landed in that pasture near Metz, France, and this is the second time. That always got your attention when you walked into the squadron operations building and saw your name on the bulletin board as missing in action. So I felt very fortunate in my military experiences.
Dad, can you tell about the short lesson that you have told us in the past about the 3 degrees lesson?
Yes, I'll be happy to. We were assigned one day to a target, and shortly after our takeoff, my navigator, Lieutenant Melkus, called to me on the intercom. He said, "Sir, we're off course." And I said, "What do you mean we're off course?" "How much?" He said, 3 degrees. And I said, "Well, Mel, I don't know what I'll do about it. We're flying in formation, and the colonel is leading us up in front. I'm not going to call him on the radio and say, 'Colonel, this is Lieutenant Buckner. You're off course, 3 degrees.'" But anyway, I said maybe he has different instructions since we took off. As we approached the target area, which was 4+ hours away, we still were off course, 3 degrees. And when we arrived at the target area, instead of arriving at what we called the IP, or the initial point of the bomb run, we were off far enough that we were directly over the target. As an example, if we were going to bomb the city of Salt Lake City, we would never fly directly into the city. We'd fly to a city like Ogden and then make a sharp turn and go down the bomb run and bomb the city that was our target. Well, on this particular day, we ended up right over the target before the colonel and his navigator, Major, realized their mistake. And so they led the bomber stream around 270 degrees to come in from a different direction to bomb the city. During that time, we were attacked by 3 Messerschmitt 262 that shot down 3 of our planes. 30 men lost their lives, or 27, all because of a simple 3-degree error that could have been corrected any time along the way. It taught me a great lesson that I've shared many times with people, that if you find that you've made a mistake, correct it as soon as possible. Don't wait to correct it later, because it can be devastating. And on this particular day, we learned that lesson by not correcting the 3-degree error. I was fortunate enough to be able to bring my crew and our ship back to the United States at the end of the war. We flew our plane from our base to Iceland, stopping in Scotland the night before, then Iceland, then Goose Bay, Labrador, and then back to Bradley Field, Connecticut, where we left our plane. We were scheduled at that time, and this was in July of 1945 to be reassigned to the Pacific Ocean. But we were given a 30-day leave, so I came home on leave at that time and had the opportunity of becoming better acquainted with my future wife. Melba had been very loyal and written letters to me every week, and I wrote back to her every week, and our friendship grew over that period of time. But I was home on leave for 30 days, and during that time we became engaged as such. And even though we'd never done a lot of dating as such, we had written many letters to each other. And I was most impressed with Melba's family. They were dedicated members of the church. And I must honestly confess that I looked at Melba as a future mother of our family and realized she would be a wonderful mother. And that was one of the qualities that endeared me to her at that time, because she had the talent and the determination and dedication to live the gospel, and as such to set the proper example for our future family. She's always been a jewel, and these 65 years of married life have been joy and happiness for us. At the end of the war, I came back, and within a week after I was out of the service, while I was home on leave, the 30 days, they dropped the big bomb over Tokyo, or over Japan, and that ended the war in Japan, in the Pacific. So we were then allowed to separate ourselves from the Air Force, and I had been sent back to Tampa, Florida, to be there, where I had the opportunity of resigning my position and being released. I rode home on a bus all the way to Salt Lake City, and a week later we were married in the Salt Lake Temple by President Robert I. Burton, our former stake president, who was in the temple presidency of the Salt Lake Temple. We then immediately left for Brigham Young University, where I picked up my schooling again. Melba went to school that year, and I did too. And I graduated in 1946 from BYU. At the award assembly that year, I was fortunate enough to receive what they called the Efficiency Award, presented to a senior student for his 4 years of college experience. Many of them referred to it as the Outstanding Senior Award. I've never used that expression, although I felt that it was good because it was the last presentation made at the award assembly. And I was given that gold watch as a graduating senior. That was a recognition that I truly valued and felt was a great accomplishment. We had the opportunity, after graduating from BYU, of traveling to Hartford, Connecticut, to the insurance school at Travelers Insurance Company, where I registered and participated for 4 weeks. And Melba worked for Travelers during those 4 weeks. They were kind enough to give her a job while I was in school there. And then I came back in August of that year, 1946, and started in the insurance business. The following January, I became a partner with my father under the name of Buckner Insurance Counselors, and we operated out of 312 Kiesel Building in Ogden, Utah at that time as a partnership. That became my profession, and I carried it on through until I retired. After we returned from Hartford, Connecticut, we began our sojourn in Ogden and ultimately built a home on Liberty Avenue, 3573 Liberty Avenue. and then ultimately built a home on Country Hills Drive. These are our two main homes that we owned. Linda was born September 27th, 1947, and we were so pleased to have a baby girl in our family. She was a beautiful daughter and had curls that many people admired, but Melba kept the curls meticulously, and they were just delightful. In 1950, David was born.
Brent
was born. And I'll never forget what Dr. Johnson said after the birth of Brent. He came into the room and he said, "Well, Lamar, I did the best I could, and it scared me to death. I didn't know what had happened to Melba." And then he added, "I got you a son." And then I knew that he was joking with me. So that was the addition of Brent to our family. And so we had as many kinds as Brigham had, one girl and one boy. During the 1950s, as I was getting established in the insurance business, I became affiliated with the Ogden JCs, the Junior Chamber of Commerce, and was eventually elected president of the Ogden JCs, and later became state president of the JCs. It was while I was state president that I was encouraged to run for national vice president of the JCs, which I did, and was elected to that office in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The following year, I became a candidate to run for president of the national JCs, and the convention was held in Colorado Springs. We went into the elections that afternoon with 3 candidates, and we had to have 5 ballots before the results were determined. It was only after the 4th ballot that one of the candidates withdrew, and then I was elected president on the 5th ballot. I picked up many of the delegates that he'd had, and that became an experience where we were required to move within a month to Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is the headquarters of the JC organization. We moved down there and lived there for a year. I did a lot of traveling that year. I traveled to all the states in the Union at that time. And in May of that year, the following year, I traveled around the world, a trip around the world, visiting JC chapters. I had the opportunity of meeting President Eisenhower during those years. I was invited to have lunch at the White House with President Eisenhower and Secretary of Agriculture Ezra Taft Benson and other prominent organization presidents. President Rotary, Kiwanis, Lions, and all were invited to the White House at that time. My JC experience took me to cities and areas throughout the entire United States that proved to be a great experience. In the meantime, Melba stayed in Tulsa, Oklahoma while I was gone most of the time, and she as such took care of our 3 children then, Linda, Brent, and Terry. Terry was just a young baby, and she took care of them. But at the convention to be held in June in Atlanta, Georgia, when I was going out of office, I was just returning from my trip around the world and came directly to Atlanta, and she came there and met me. And we had a great experience at the graduation event for our convention. The JCs gave me a brand new Oldsmobile as a gift, and it was a Oldsmobile 98, and we were most impressed with that. Drove it home from Atlanta proved to be a wonderful memento of our gift. Terry had been born on August 20th, 1953, and so when we reported to Tulsa the following July of 1954, he was not a year old at that time, and just starting to learn to walk. But he grew up very much during that year. But Melba took care of all three of the children while I traveled across the country and around the world. While we were living in Tulsa, we were members of the Tulsa branch, and we had the opportunity at the time to attend a district conference at which Elder Harold B. Lee was the visitor, and we had a chance to meet with him on that occasion, which was a special blessing for us. Our experiences in the JCs carried forth to the international scene. We visited a World Congress in Mexico City, and then the following year we visited one in Edinburgh, Scotland, and Melba went with us there. The year after that we attended one in Wellington, New Zealand. So I attended 3 international congresses as a result of my JC activities during that decade.
Oh, what about the Miss America pageant? You got to tell about that.
During the year, I had the opportunity of serving as a judge at the Miss America pageant in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And I was a judge there with very prominent people as such, including movie stars and others, and it proved to be a delightful exposure that I had with being a judge at the Miss America.
It was Grace Kelly, wasn't it?
Grace Kelly was one of the judges there.
So did you pick the winner?
Well, we think we did. We think we did. But it was another one of the great experiences. After I returned to Ogden from my experiences with the JCs in 1958, I was called to become the new bishop of the Ogden 55th Ward. And this was a ward that we'd moved into on the weekend of Thanksgiving of 1957. And when I went in to get my deposit back from Utah Power and Light Company, President William J. Critchlow, who worked for the power company, saw me in the building and called me over to his desk. He was our stake president at the time. He immediately said, "When are you moving into your new home?" And I said, "I'm moving in on Saturday." He says, "Wonderful. We've been waiting for you. You're going to be the new bishop of a ward up there." And that was the way I was called to become a bishop. I was surprised, shocked, and flabbergasted. He then said, "Now keep your eyes open for someone to be counselors for you." And he says, "We're going to call you to be bishop if President McKay will release you from the general board on which I had been serving in the Young Men's Organization." We moved into our new home on Country Hills, and during the Christmas holidays, I decided I needed some way to get acquainted with the people in the ward area. So we began to hold parties in our home almost on a nightly basis. And I would invite couples in to have dinner with us and all. And I didn't tell Melba why, but she finally said, "I've never seen you be such a social butterfly." She says, "You've been busy almost every night inviting someone into our home." I went back and told President Critchlow that my wife was getting concerned at my social calendar. And I said, "Is there any reason why I can't tell her?" "Oh, you can tell her," he said. I said, "Well, you told me not to tell anybody." and so I haven't told anybody. Well, you can tell her, but just tell her not to spread the word. But we still don't have permission from President McKay. A few days after Christmas, I was walking up 24th Street, and I passed Steve's Office Supply. This is a business that was operated by A. Walter Stevenson, who was a counselor in the Young Men's General Presidency, where I was serving as a member of the General Board. He stopped me and said, "Is there any way you can get away from your business for 2 or 3 weeks? We need someone to go on a tour of the Southern States Mission for the church, and would like to recommend you if you can get away." I told him I thought maybe I could, but then I went to President Critchlow and said, "I've got a problem. The General Board is assigning me to go on a 3-week tour of the Southern States, and I need to know whether I should tell him yes or no." He said, "Well, you go ahead and go. We'll wait till you get back and hope that we hear from President McKay by then as to whether or not he'll release you from the General Board." So I flew with members of the General Board. There were 3 brethren and 3 sisters, 6 of us, that traveled to Texas, New Orleans, Florida, Georgia, and I left the group in Georgia to fly up to Washington, D.C. for a Red Cross National Board of Directors meeting, since I was serving on their board at that time. I got back home late Saturday night, and Melba had told me that President Critchlow wants you to call immediately. So I called him. He said, "I need to have you report tomorrow morning at the High Council meeting in the Stake Center at 7:30. When I reported and went in, he announced to the High Council that President McKay had given permission for me to be released from the Young Men's General Board to become Bishop of the Ogden 55th Ward. And that was the beginning of my calling as a bishop to the ward. I was ordained a bishop by Elder Harold B. Lee, and he ordained me a bishop. And at the conclusion of the ordination, he said, "Now I want to give you some advice, Lamar." I could hardly wait to hear what he said. And then he said, "Now plan today for the day when you're released." And that was the advice, to just serve, planning for the day when I'd be released. I served as bishop for 5 years, and then was called from the bishop's position to be a counselor to Keith W. Wilcox, who was a stake president at that time. He'd been a stake president for about a year, and he called me to take the place of Lorenzo Peterson, who was ill with cancer. And so I served him as a counselor and also served as bishop quietly for several weeks, serving in both capacities, unknown to the public, until the following stake conference, when I was sustained and released as bishop. And that was the service that I had with President Wilcox. I served 5 years as a counselor to President Wilcox. And then we had a visit from Elder Thomas S. Monson, a member of the Quorum of the 12, who came to our stake conference. And he came to create a new stake known as the Weber State College Stake. And I was called at that time to be the first stake president, and thus was released from the presidency of the Weber Heights Stake. And I became president of the college stake, and we organized several wards and created all of the organizations that were needed by the stake. That proved to be a wonderful opportunity and experience. I served as stake president for 5 years and then was released at the end of the 5 years. At that time, I had the opportunity of going back on the Young Men's General Board and served there for about a year or so before I was called in again, and this time by Elder Neil Maxwell, who called me in and told me I'd been approved to be a regional representative of the 12, and I was assigned to serve 6 stakes in the Weber and Davis County areas, and I served those 6 stakes 3 years in each set of 6 stakes. I served for about 6 years as a regional representative of the 12. Kathy was born in 1959, and we were so pleased to get a little brunette baby. Linda had been a blonde, and we felt very blessed to have 2 boys and 2 girls at this time. David was born in 1963, and when he was born, Melba had a terrible labor before his birth, and the doctor finally had to determine after 48 hours that he would need a cesarean birth, and so she was given a cesarean birth for David, but everything worked out fine after. The 5 children completed our family and have been a great blessing in our lives. They've now given us 25 grandchildren and 31 great-grandchildren, and we have another on the way that'll be here in November, so that'll be number 32. In 1965, I became involved in politics in Weber County and ran for the legislature. I was elected to the House of Representatives for 2 years and then ran for the Senate, where I served for 8 years. So I had 10 years between 65 and 75 where I served in the legislature. It was following the service in the legislature after I lost my chance for re-election by 15 votes that I was called in to meet with President Kimball. And as I went into his office, he indicated to me that they had in mind for me a calling which would be to serve as a mission president. He told me not to tell anybody other than my wife, and that we would hear within a week or two. It was 4 weeks before we got a letter. I thought they'd changed their mind, and when we got the letter, realized we were being called to serve in the California Sacramento Mission starting July 1 of 1975. It was a marvelous experience for us. We took Kathy and David with us to the mission field, and we had 3 wonderful years. Kathy served down there with the young women and graduated from Kennedy High School, and David got his Eagle Scout badge from his experience in Sacramento. But we found this to be one of our great blessings in life. We had up to 252 missionaries at one time, which was the second largest number of missionaries in any of the missions. And our mission covered from the Golden Gate Bridge to the Oregon border, from the Pacific Ocean to the tops of the Pacific mountain range to the east of Sacramento. All of that area was a part of our mission. And we did a lot of traveling to all the little towns and areas where our missionaries served. We made many friends and thoroughly enjoyed the spiritual blessings that came to us in the mission field as we met with general authorities and others. President Kimball came to our mission one time, and I was invited to go to lunch, Melba and I, with him and with the regional representative at that time of the area. He had asked us to visit his brother, who lived up near Chico, California, and he had not been active in the church, but we looked up his brother and ultimately got him ordained an elder, which President Kimball thoroughly appreciated. Following our visit with him, he traveled that night to go to Chico, California. On the way to Chico, he stopped at a stop sign in one of the little towns, and there were two missionaries on bicycles. And he said to the driver, "Let's pull over and shake hands with the elders." As they pulled over, the passenger with President Kimball said to the elders, "Elders, would you like to shake hands with the president?" One of my sharp missionaries said, "President of what?" And he soon found out, as President Kimball shook hands with him. That night they called me and said, "President, you won't believe who was in our town tonight." I said, "Go ahead, tell me." He said, "President Kimball," and we shook hands with him. The next day, President Kimball had visited his brother up in the little town near Chico. He was traveling back to the airport to Sacramento. On the way through a little town called Live Oak, they saw two missionaries beside the road. So once again they pulled over, shook hands with them. Lo and behold, same two missionaries from the night before. The elders said every time we turned around, we were convinced President Kimball was watching us. They never worked so hard in their life as they did the following week. It was a great experience that we had.
Oh, you got to tell the liver story.
You want me to tell the liver story?
Yeah.
Elder Mel and his companion were in an apartment, and one day they found that they were invited to lunch or dinner. They went to dinner, and lo and behold, the hostess served liver and onions. Elder Mel couldn't stand to eat liver, so instead of eating it, he took it and wrapped it up in his paper napkin and tucked it in his suit pocket. And when the hostess came back in, she said, "Oh, I'm so proud of you. You've eaten all of your dinner." They laughed to themselves, never thought any more of it. A couple of weeks later, Elder Mel's companion said, "Elder, we've got a problem. There's a dead mouse in this apartment. Something in the apartment is dead. I can smell it." And they looked all over for a dead mouse and couldn't find it. And it wasn't till Elder Mel reached into that suit pocket and pulled out that liver that they found the source of the smell. And I said to him, "Elder Mel, is that story true?" He said, "President, that stinking story is totally true," as such. But we had a lot of fine experiences with our missionaries in the mission field and had a lot of opportunities to meet with general authorities that came through our area and in meetings that we would be invited into from time to time. In my seventh decade, which includes the years 1982 to 1992, we did a lot of traveling. We traveled to Europe. We traveled to Southern California and a lot of the places that we've enjoyed seeing. It was during this period of time that we were called by President Hinckley to come to his office, and he told us we were being called to become president of the Ogden Temple. This was a complete shock to us. I had been serving again on the Young Men's General Board, and we'd gone to Philmont Scout Ranch several different years to participate in the scouting program. But on this particular occasion, we were called to become president of the Ogden Temple, and that gave me a release from the General Board. We served in the Ogden Temple for 3 years, and as such, thoroughly enjoyed all of the workers that came there. We had many wonderful spiritual experiences. We learned that, among other things, that imperfect people come to the temple on the road to perfection. If you wait till you're perfect to go to the temple, you'll never make it in this life. And so people need to realize that imperfect people go to the temple on the road to perfection. We had wonderful counselors, President Kent Payne and President Don Buswell, and their wives served with Melba, who served as matron to the temple. We enjoyed very much our association with all of them. The months in the 80s were crowded with many activities, and we began to stay closer to home because of our church assignments. As such, we found that following our assignment in the Ogden Temple, we had the opportunity of serving a year at Temple Square on a mission, and we served there with with President Robert Arbertson, who was the director of the mission on Temple Square. We traveled to and from Temple Square with brother and sister Farrell Carter, our neighbors, who would travel down and back with us, and that developed close friendships. Farrell had been one of my counselors in the stake presidency, and so we knew them well and relied heavily upon their friendship. In the decade of the 90s, in 1992, while I was still serving at Temple Square as a guide, I received a call from Elder Russell Ballard's office asking me to come by his office, which I did. It was at that time that he called me to become a member of the church's sesquicentennial committee that was going to celebrate in 1997 the 150th anniversary of the pioneers coming into the valley. I served on that committee for 7 years until we completed the 1997 activities, and then we had a few items that we worked on after. One of the contributions that I made to the committee was the suggestion that we try and get some kind of a marker for the tombstones of pioneers that would identify them as pioneers. We developed a brass marker that was entitled Faith in Every Footstep. And these small markers could be permanently attached to stone tombstones to mark the commemoration. And we later found them all over the valley on tombstones. Many people purchased them for their ancestors and identified them. It was one of the contributions that I felt worked out very well, that I suggested to the committee, and they accepted it. Later on in that decade, in the year 2002, or 2000 it was, I was given the opportunity of receiving the Distinguished Eagle Scout Award from the Boy Scouts of America. This was the second one ever given in our council. The first one had been given to Willard Eccles years ago, and then I received this one in the Ogden Tabernacle at the annual Scout meeting. And it was a surprise, but a very delightful recognition of my service as an Eagle Scout. This was during that same decade of time, and as such, pretty much brought to a climax my service in scouting. Since I had been on the area executive committee, and after this presentation, I became a member of the advisory committee of Western Region, which was not as responsible as being on the executive committee, but it was a wonderful opportunity to commemorate scouting in my life with the receiving the Distinguished Eagle Scout Award. I appreciated that very much and was highly honored to be able to receive it. The years since then have been a little more mellow, not so active. In the 90s, in 1993, we went back to Germany to visit over there. We had the opportunity of returning to Germany on 2 occasions, besides that one, to visit with points of interest and sites that we thoroughly enjoyed. The years after the 90s were changed because of our health situation. Melba was diagnosed with dementia in about 1995, and we began doing everything we could assist her health and needs. In 1900 and in the year 2005, I injured my back and had to have back surgery. And it was during that time that it was determined that I couldn't take care of Melba any longer. If she walked away or if she fell, I couldn't lift her. So she was placed in a care center at Manor Care and has been there for 6 years up till now. She physically is doing remarkably well, but she's been blessed deeply by the comforting spirit of our Savior, and as such, she enjoys each day's sojourn in the care center. She, as such, has been very patient, and I've been very blessed to have the opportunity of visiting with her twice a day, at noon and night, where I help feed her her meals. She eats well, she smiles frequently, and as such, every once in a while will make some comment or remark out of the memory book that she recalls. One day I walked up to her in the hall and she said, "Well, hello, dear. I love you." And that made my day, because she hadn't said that for a long time. 10 minutes later, the doctor walked in. She said the same thing to him. "Hello, dear. I love you." And I said, "Hey, wait a minute. You got the wrong man," as such. We have laughed about it many a times. She, as such, has been a real delight, a real sweetheart, a real companion. And as such, we have been greatly blessed with our children. With the birth of David and Kathy into the family, they brought our number of children to 5, and they, as such, have been a marvelous blessing to us. Even as I approach the age of 90, Kathy comes out and does Melba's laundry twice a week, and that's very helpful. Once a week, Linda comes to my home and does the vacuuming and cleaning of my laundry and changing my linens. So we've been very blessed with our 2 daughters that live in this area, as they've helped us. I just want to leave with you my testimony of what I know to be true. I'm so eternally grateful for the restoration of the gospel, for the mission of our divine Savior, for his loving contribution, his atoning sacrifice for each and every one of us. We are deeply grateful for the blessings we receive at his hands, and we've felt many times his strength during our hours and days of need, and we've been most blessed to feel his closeness to us as we have sojourned here in mortality. I just want my children, grandchildren, and loved ones to know that the blessings that we have received from our forebears and those who have gone before us have been carried on through, and we hope carried into the lives of each of our children and grandchildren today, that they might always value their membership in his church and always value the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's a great blessing in the lives of the saints and members of the church, and we're deeply indebted for it. We know that God lives, and we know that Jesus is the Christ, and we know that families can be together forever, and we look forward to that blessing of having our entire family with us in the future kingdoms that we'll be invited to live in. Now may the Lord bless all of our loved ones, that they'll realize the heritage that is theirs, and may this small reminder of my history be a help and assistance to them as they sojourn in life. I humbly pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.